and welcome. I'm Asima Katauka and you are watching News X World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. US President Donald Trump has ruled out an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine after his summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska, insisting only a direct peace agreement can end the war. According to media reports, Trump stated on his Truth Social that ceasefires often do not hold up, making a full peace deal the only viable solution. President Zelensky announces he will meet Donald Trump in Washington on Monday. He posted on Telegram that he is grateful for the invitation, amid fresh diplomatic efforts after the Alaska summit. Ukraine says Moscow launched 85 drones and a ballistic missile overnight, just hours after Putin and Trump's talks ended without a ceasefire deal. Kyiv reports shooting down 61 drones as strikes hit 4 frontline regions. A blast at a factory in Russia's Ryazan region has killed 11 people and injured 130 people, with rescuers still searching through the rubble. According to the emergency ministry, Governor Pavel Malkov has said that the incident was triggered by a fire inside a workshop about 320 kilometers southeast of Moscow. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has announced she will meet US President Donald Trump in Washington to discuss ending the war in Ukraine, emphasizing the need for European involvement in security guarantees, while European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen also welcomed the move, calling it a sign for hope for peace. US President Donald Trump has said that Chinese President Xi Jinping assured him that China would not invade Taiwan during his term. According to a Fox News interview, the Chinese embassy reiterated that Taiwan remains the most important issue in Sino-US ties, while Taiwan strongly rejected Beijing's sovereignty claims. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi will visit India from Monday to Wednesday for discussions on the disputed Himalayan frontier. It will only be the second such meeting since the deadly 2020 clash between the two sides. Rescuers are pulling bodies from debris after torrential rains triggered flash floods across northern Pakistan. Authorities say at least 321 people have died as the monsoon season batters the region. European leaders have said that they are ready to work with President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky towards a trilateral summit, reaffirming strong support for Ukraine after the teleconference with Washington. They emphasized their unwavering solidarity and stressed that sanctions and economic pressures on Russia will continue until a just and lasting peace is achieved. They welcomed Trump's offer of security guarantees and warned that international borders must not be changed by force. Moreover, the EU statement said that Russia cannot veto Ukraine's path to EU or NATO, and no restrictions should be imposed on Ukraine's armed forces or its cooperation with third countries. Meanwhile, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer also backed the EU's position, saying sanctions on Moscow will continue until Putin halts his offensive, and praised the US and Europe for providing robust security guarantees. Starmer also confirmed talks with Zelensky, Trump, and other leaders, highlighting the need for further discussions, including Zelensky, and noting Trump's efforts have moved the international community closer to ending Russia's war. Furthermore, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has also emphasized that strong security guarantees are essential to protect both Ukraine and Europe's vital interests. Now, for this discussion, we're joined by Matti Zweig. He's a geopolitical expert, joins us live from Israel. Thank you, Matti, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now,
Good to see you too.
Thank you. Now, are there specific areas where you expect stronger support from NATO or EU member states in the coming days?
Well, I think everybody has the same line of reactions now. It's a mix of hope and disappointment because it was the summit itself was thrown together just a week after, and that it was first announced. So not really the people was trying to understand what's going on, especially because they understood lately that Zelensky is not coming. And, all the logistics part, even to get to the place, it took a lot of time to get to Elmendorf Richardson base. And of course, they did a big show about that. But anyway, nobody's talking a lot. Even the final results declarations, they were very, very short. Usually they use a lot of words. And this time, also Trump and also Putin say that they are pursuing peace. No, they didn't talk about peace, really. And so the EU can understand that there were some points that they agree between them, but nothing is going to be clear until the next Monday when Zelensky himself is coming to Washington to talk to Trump. And I think he's going to receive a long list of requirements of Putin. And then there is the big questions. Is just Trump an emissary to say Zelensky what the Russians want? Or is going to be a kind of a political leverage and to try from both sides to get something and to finish this war, to get a permanent ceasefire in some way? The EU is really suspicious about that, and they are talking about more cooperation between them to get their goals of getting the 5% of the GDP to defense purposes. And then what they are saying is, we are going to say, we are going to do what Trump asked from us from the beginning. So you have to pass almost 3 years of war to understand this. Okay, this is very interesting. And also Trump, he said that he wanted to walk away from this meeting with a ceasefire. Even occasionally he said that leading to this day, but then nothing is really coming out, and there is a big disappointment from all parts. I think nothing is going to be clear until Zelensky meets Trump, and let's see how much is going to be Zelensky flexible after he talked also with the European Union and understood what is the real backup he's receiving from them more than words. So this is, again, we are chasing each other to see what is the best outcome for everyone. And we know that what Trump wants. We know also what Putin wants. And now we are going to say if Zelensky can be in the middle, how many concessions it's going to do and how much is going to what lengths to get a ceasefire finally in this endless war.
And Mehdi, how is this covered where you are in Israel in media? Is this covered intensely, this news?
I think, yes, of course. Everything that Trump does is always very covered because it has also some influence in everything that is happening also to Israel and the Middle East. Because part of the big push to go forward in this conversation with Putin and maybe giving him things that he didn't think before is part of the failure of getting to an end in our area. And we have to, also the political system and also the society and the military are very aware that it can be against Israel if it's going to be on our account because things are not moving forward in the way Trump wants. And interesting that many things have happened in the last 6 months since Trump took office, because only 1 month before that, Assad fell in Syria. It was the war between Israel and Iran, and all this domino has been changed completely for the Russian side. I mean, they don't have a proper influence now in the Middle East. Even their ports have been completely severed by the presence of other forces now in the Mediterranean, yes? So now that everything changed, and now that Trump, with his maybe crazy but right thing to do from his point of view is getting to a lot of conflicts to end. Like I said in other interviews before, Pakistan, India, or Thailand, Cambodia, or Armenia and Azerbaijan. And all these are places, especially Armenia and Azerbaijan, a sphere of influence of Putin that now have been completely changed. And he start maybe to understand that if he doesn't finish the conflict in the border with Ukraine, is going to continue to concentrate only in this place, and he's going to lose maybe big time in other parts of the world about his own influence. So everything together, if you put it in a package, maybe it's going to do a breakthrough, but we will know it only from next week.
Thank you very much, Matti Zweig, for joining us and sharing your insight on that topic. Thank you. Now we move on. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he will travel to Washington on Monday to meet President Donald Trump, following the U.S. President's summit with President Vladimir Putin in Alaska. President Zelensky said that Kyiv supports Trump's idea of a trilateral meeting with the U.S. and Russia, and has welcomed what he called positive signals from Washington on security guarantees. But reactions inside Ukraine has been skeptical. Let's first listen into what a Kyiv political analyst has said on the Alaska talks.
From little information which was released in the morning, the situation is like that no agreement reached. There are some preliminary negotiations, probably some further meetings. And this is actually fits into the plan of Putin, which tries to postpone the time, tries to postpone the decision making, and try to utilize this time for further activities. And you saw that today already at night we had a new shelling in Ukraine. So we'll see what will happen, but the prognosis is that we won't see any peace deal or ceasefire agreement till the end of the year. About next meeting between Putin, Zelensky and Trump, I think that if this meeting will happen, it requires a lot of preparational steps, a lot of negotiations between all allies and partners, including European partners.
Moreover, we also had residents and commentators who voiced their frustration and called the summit a diplomatic win for Putin, as it offered no clear progress for Ukraine towards peace. Let's listen into what some of them had to say.
Я думаю, що це дуже некорисна зустріч, бо питання по Україні вони повинні вирішуватися з Україною, з участю українців і президента, влади і так далі. І тим більше, що конкретних ніяких заяв не було, і ми по факту не розуміємо, з чим домовилися ці два великі хлопці.
Ні до чого не договорились, ніяких розподілів нема. Як стріляли, так і будуть стріляти. Як пускали свої ракети на Київ, так і будуть пускати. Ще й додають сюди дрони реактивні.
Ми харків'яни вже такі фаталісти, чесно. Ми віримо в перемогу, знаємо, що вона буде, але хто саме цьому буде сприяти, чи як воно станеться, це тільки Богу відомо. Тому ми надіємося на краще, не втрачаємо віру, донатимо, допомагаємо чим можемо, робимо свою справу і не дуже заглядаємось там, що там той Трамп робить.
In short, many Ukrainians have expressed doubts whether a ceasefire or agreement would emerge this year, warning that Moscow will continue its attacks. This comes after the Trump-Putin summit on Alaska yesterday, which ended without a ceasefire deal, with both leaders claiming progress but providing no details. Now, for this discussion, we're joined by Glenn Grant. He's an ex-advisor to Ukrainian Defense Minister, joins us live from Riga. Thank you, Glenn, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, thank you. We had a discussion yesterday, and you called it right. No deal, warm words, warm gestures, but cold reality of no deal. What are your thoughts now?
By the way, I'm in Kiev. I'm not in Riga this week.
Okay.
So I've had a good opportunity to talk to people as well. My views are completely unchanged. I mean, there was never going to be a deal coming into this meeting. And the moment that Lavrov turned up with a USSR t-shirt, sweatshirt wearing, then it was clear that they were just here to get as much out of it for themselves as they could do, which is what they've done. Putin has been put back onto the world stage, acknowledged by Trump, and he's not going to give Trump anything. In fact, he's just mocking Trump at the moment. So in my view, this is one of the most dangerous meetings that has been held in the world in tens of years, because it's just shown the USA to be weak.
Right, and building on that, do you think by framing NATO's eastward expansion, and you said that this is becoming more and more dangerous as Putin holds the narrative kind of, so is Putin trying to shift the narrative away from Russia's responsibility?
Well, in the first thing, one's got to stop this nonsense about NATO expansion being of any importance. Russia has been invading people for years and years before NATO was even thought of, even a dream. So this is part of Russia's actions and the way they behave. They're expansionist. NATO's got nothing to do with it. Putin will do his best to gain credibility because he needs resources to continue his war from places like Africa, and he needs to show that he is still the man on the spot to China, to North Korea, and to his other allies. And he's done that quite successfully with this trip. One thing I would say is I'm not completely convinced that was the real Putin that came to the meeting. His behavior was very un-Putin-like. So I think, I leave that to the better experts. But yeah, Putin has come out of this on the up with credibility, and he will try and push this credibility as hard as he can to make Ukraine look like Ukraine is the problem, not him the problem.
Glenn, that's really interesting what you said about Putin, but what's your take on Trump? So Trump throwing Biden administration under the bus there, and kind of also Putin leveraged on that, saying that, yes, it was Trump in the office, this wouldn't have happened, this invasion or this war. So what's your take on Trump?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I almost don't know what to say apart from the fact he appears either ill or deluded. I think he's ill. I think he's got something wrong with him severely. I mean, he doesn't make any sense. He doesn't talk rationally. He doesn't act rationally. And you can bull this up and say this is just Trump being Trump. But I'm sorry, but he can't even finish sentences at the moment. So to actually for him to go into a meeting with someone who is a consummate negotiator, KGB trained, and then come out of it with nothing and say it was a 10 out of 10 meeting. I mean, that should worry every American, and certainly every senior American in important positions, because frankly, in my view, they've got a president that is not actually working in any way as a president should do.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Always nice hearing from you, and very interesting insights you've shared. Thank you very much. Now we move on. Following the highly anticipated summit between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska, both Russian and Ukrainian media have offered contrasting views on the outcome. Russian state television, including channel RU-24, has reported that the summit yielded no new sanctions against Russia and no breakthroughs on Ukraine, but emphasized the diplomatic victory for Putin. Meanwhile, Ukrainian outlets, including Telemarathon, criticized the lack of a ceasefire agreement, calling the summit's results disappointing. In an interview after the meeting, Trump has rated the summit a 10 out of 10, despite the absence of tangible outcomes, advising Ukrainian President Zelensky to seek a deal. President Putin was warmly welcomed in Alaska, marking a symbolic return to global diplomacy after years of isolation. Let's listen into the Russian news presenter.
Москва рассчитывает, что Киев и Европа не будут мешать прогрессу, который наметился в украинском урегулировании. Такое заявление сделал Владимир Путин на пресс-конференции по итогам переговоров с Дональдом Трампом. Встреча в Анкоридже, которую еще до ее начала называли исторической, завершилась. Визит российского лидера на Аляску продлился 5 часов. Основная часть мероприятия состоялась на военной базе Элмендорф-Ричардсон. Свои оценки прошедшей встречи с президентом России уже дал Дональд Трамп. По шкале от 0 до 10 он поставил переговорам 10. В интервью телеканалу Fox News глава Белого дома заявил, что Вашингтон и Москва согласовали, в частности, вопрос о гарантиях безопасности для Украины. Трамп призвал Киев пойти на сделку с Россией, а Европу поучаствовать в украинском урегулировании. И добавил, Вашингтон не планирует вводить новые санкции против Москвы и ее торговых партнеров.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian outlets, including Telemarathon, criticized the lack of a ceasefire agreement, calling the summit's results disappointing. In an interview after the meeting, President Trump rated the summit 10 out of 10 despite the absence of tangible outcomes, advising Ukrainian President Zelensky to seek a deal. Putin was warmly welcomed in Alaska, marking a symbolic return to global diplomacy after years of isolation. Let's listen into the Ukrainian news presenter.
Угоди про перемир'я немає, але і санкцій поки що не буде. Таким є результат зустрічі Трампа і Путіна на Алясці. Американський президент, попри відсутність будь-яких помітних досягнень, запевнив в інтерв'ю американському каналу Fox News, що переговори минули на 10 з 10 і що тепер, мовляв, справа за Зеленським, якому він радить прийняти угоду.
News outlets across Europe have been covering the high-profile summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska. While both leaders described the talks as productive, no agreement was reached on resolving the war in Ukraine. French Channel called it a highly orchestrated return for Putin to the global stage, while Germany's Tagesschau reported the summit ended with no concrete outcomes. The BBC pointed out the silence from Ukrainian President Zelensky, who was not invited to this meeting. After nearly 3 hours of talks, President Trump and President Putin briefly addressed the press, mentioning progress but offering no specifics. Let's listen into what some of the news presenters have said.
Good morning. It's Saturday, the 16th of August. Our main story today. The US President Donald Trump and the Russian President Vladimir Putin have failed to reach an agreement to end the war in Ukraine at their much-anticipated summit in Alaska.
After a nearly 3-hour meeting, the leaders gave a joint press statement in which President Trump said great progress had been made but declined to give any details or take questions from the press. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky wasn't invited to the summit and hasn't yet commented.
Das Gipfeltreffen von US-Präsident Trump und dem russischen Präsidenten Putin in Alaska ist ohne konkretes Ergebnis zu Ende gegangen. Zu einer möglichen Waffenruhe im Ukraine-Krieg äußerten sie sich nicht. Beide Staatschefs sprachen aber von produktiven Gesprächen.
Marqué le point justement hier soir, tapis rouge, avion de combat et beaucoup d'aimabilité. Un retour sur la scène internationale à la mise en scène très orchestrée pour Vladimir Poutine. Poignée de main historique avec Donald Trump en pleine guerre, toujours en cours en Ukraine.
Now for this discussion, we're joined by Sander van Hoorn. He's a former EU correspondent, joins us live from Brussels. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to NewsX World. Given this EU's firm stance that Russia cannot dictate Ukraine's NATO or EU's path, how do you see it? How is EU seeing it?
EU, I think, is glad that there's no result because that beats a bad result. We've seen bad results after Trump-Putin conversations where Trump adopted Putin's line. Now, that has not happened, but what has happened, everybody is still grasping. EU leaders, including Ursula von der Leyen and the presidents for example, the UK, France, Germany, Poland have been briefed after the meeting by Donald Trump. The NATO was also present in that conversation, but still details are scarce about what was discussed, what was agreed upon. Trump suggesting that some points were agreed upon, but what are those points? So I think Europe is still reeling and trying to grasp what exactly happened in Alaska.
And Is Ukraine or EU preparing diplomatically and militarily for this potential Russian retaliation again?
Diplomatically, yes. EU is in constant talks. After being briefed by President Trump, EU leaders continued their conversation, and I guess they will keep doing so in the coming days, especially since President Volodymyr Zelensky is visiting Washington on Monday. And everybody is trying to scramble to put Europe at the table, maybe not directly, but then at least in consultations before and after negotiations, because Europe is paying the bill right now in Ukraine, supplying a lot of the weapons that are being used now. And they say it's a war on our continent, so we should be involved in any solution. And as they point out, Ukraine primarily should be involved. There can be no territorial concessions to Russia without explicit consent of Zelensky and the Ukrainian population. So those are the basic lines of the EU, and they will guard those lines. But how can you guard them if they're not at the table? That's still the biggest issue in the EU.
And Sander, now, how does Ukraine view the proposed trilateral summit with you mentioned already, but President Trump and European leaders? What concrete outcomes would they hope to achieve?
Well, if there is going to be a trilateral summit, because we've seen speculation about that happening in the past. It would have happened, for example, in Istanbul, Turkey, and then Putin declined to show up. So basically what you see now, I think, is Zelensky calling Putin's bluff. So he agreed to this trilateral meeting that is suggested by President Trump, waiting to see basically what Russia does. Will Russia send Putin to this trilateral meeting, or will they chicken out in the last instant and putting the blame on Putin? And that's basically a silly game, but that's sometimes how it works with President Trump. He has got to lay the blame somewhere, and Zelensky is trying to have him place the blame on Putin if a trilateral meeting is not going to take place. Now, if it's going to take place, the big question is when. How much diplomacy will we have seen before that trilateral meeting? Will there be like a concrete proposal before that trilateral meeting? There are so many ifs and buts that it's quite frankly pointless to speculate on it.
Thank you very much, Sander Van Horn, for joining us and sharing your insight. Always nice hearing from you. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin held a joint press conference after nearly 3 hours of peace talks on Ukraine in Alaska. The summit took place at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson in Anchorage, Alaska, following a cordial meeting between the two leaders. Let's listen into what Trump had to say.
So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them. They're going to have to agree with what Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who've come here, Scott and John Radcliffe. Thank you very much. And thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. But we had an extremely productive meeting, and many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant, but we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. Until there's a deal, I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them. They're going to have to agree with what Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who've come here, Scott, John Radcliffe. Thank you very much. But we have some of our really great leaders. They've been doing a phenomenal job. We also have some tremendous Russian business representatives here, and I think everybody wants to deal with us. We've become the hottest country anywhere in the world in a very short period of time, and we look forward to that. We look forward to dealing. We're going to try and get this over with. We really made some great progress today. I've always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin, with Vladimir. We had many tough meetings, good meetings. We were interfered with by the Russia hoax. That made it a little bit tougher to deal with, but he understood it. I think he's probably seen things like that during the course of his career. He's seen it all, but we had to put up with the Russia hoax. He knew it was a hoax, and I knew it was a hoax, but what was done was very criminal. But it made it harder for us to deal as a country in terms of the business and all of the things that we'd like to have dealt with. But we'll have a good chance when this is over. So just to put it very quickly, I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them what happened. But we had an extremely productive meeting, and many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant, but we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I would like to thank President Putin and his entire team, who I know in many cases, other than that, whose faces I get to see all the time in the newspapers. You're almost as famous as the boss, but especially this one right over here. But we had some good meetings over the years, right? Good, productive meetings over the years, and we hope to have that in the future. But let's do the most productive one right now. We're going to stop really 5, 6, 7,000, thousands of people a week from being killed, and President Putin wants to see that as much as I do. So, again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This is all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.